It's Matt and Dawn from Tea Angle. We are here at Bondi by the sea having a bit of tea sesh because we've been getting very good weather for the last couple of days, and we think we should take the full advantage of it. And here we are. We're going to check out the sculpture by the sea as well. This is the last day.
Yep, and there's obviously a lot of people walking around as well, but yeah, it's great. It's been great weather here today, and yeah, we're going to enjoy
some tea.
Enjoy a little tea sesh.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we often get asked is, what are some tips that you can give a beginner looking to start out in exploring this world of Chinese tea?
Yeah.
Now the world of Chinese tea obviously is quite a complicated world. You have all these different tea producing regions making 6 categories of different types of teas, and within each category there's also a countless number of different teas available as well. Not to mention all the different grades within each of those varieties. Like, there's a lot to think about and consider, and this is all before we even start thinking about how best to brew each and every one of these different teas.
Yeah.
And although things can seem quite complicated to begin with, you'll find that once you actually get started and sort of start to explore this world of Chinese teas, you'll find that things actually evolve quite naturally as you kind of curiously explore all the different avenues and all the different possibilities. So the question is, where does one start when trying to explore this complex world of Chinese teas? Well, you can start with a few of these points that I'm about to mention. So the first point is trying to find your tea type. So the first question you should probably ask yourself is, what was the type of tea that kind of sparked your interest in wanting to explore Chinese teas a little bit further? Like maybe it was a green tea that you had while traveling. If that's the case, then maybe you should start looking at different types of green teas from different places in China. Maybe you just like a simple English breakfast black tea. In that case, maybe a Chinese red tea would be the best place for you to start and try and explore the different types of Chinese red teas that are available, and then kind of expanding your horizons from there. So I know for me, the tea that started my whole journey was a Chinese red tea called a Dianhong, which originates from Yunnan province. And this is kind of what it looks like. I still remember the first time I actually tasted this tea. So it was around about 10 years ago on one of my earlier trips back to China. So Dawn and I were going back to China to visit her family in her hometown, and during that time obviously I was still kind of drinking coffee a lot, and that was kind of part of my morning routine. But back then coffee wasn't as widely available in China as it might be today, so not being able to get my daily fix of coffee, I had to substitute it with something else, and that ended up being tea, obviously, because tea in China, it's everywhere. We were actually drinking a lot of Chinese red teas at that time, and we thought, it'd be good to bring some of that back. So I remember asking Dawn's granddad for a recommendation on where he buys his tea, because he drinks heaps of tea, like heaps and heaps of tea. And there's a regular place that he usually goes to buy his tea. So we walked up the road and we found the shop, and then we asked the vendor, do you have any Dianhong black teas? And he kind of pointed us to a shelf that had a few different varieties of it. We kind of looked at it, and Dawn asked the tea vendor, hey, I'm pretty sure Dianhong, like the good ones, should have a few more golden tips in them, and these ones don't really have that many. And the tea vendor kind of smiled and said to Dawn, you sound like you know what you're talking about. And then he opened up a hidden drawer and pulled out this big bag of golden tippy Dianhong tea. And we thought, that looks about right. I still remember the first time I kind of brewed it back at home, and it was malty and even slightly floral kind of flavors. Yeah, that was truly a revelation for me, and that sparked my interest into wanting to dive further into Chinese teas. So the question you should really ask yourself is, what was that tea that sparked my interest in the first place? Once you have that sort of, take that first step, then the whole world kind of opens up a little bit more. Now that you kind of have a tea in mind, or at least a tea category in mind to explore, what next? Well, the next obvious step is to try and find a trusted tea vendor. It sounds pretty obvious, right? But the question is, how do you go about doing that? The first step in trying to find a trusted tea vendor is to ask an experienced tea drinker where they get their teas from. Back to my story from 10 years ago when we were looking for some red teas to bring back to Australia, we asked Dawn's grandpa where he gets his tea from, because he's been drinking tea for all his life. Every day of his life he drinks litres of it. And he's got his favourite tea shop, and well, for someone who drinks that much tea and he gets it from the same place all the time, I mean, there's got to be something good about that place. Now, if you don't know any serious tea drinkers, to ask for recommendations, another good tip is to visit a Chinese tea shop in your city, where a lot of times, like these types of tea shops, it's a particular type of tea shop where you have the tea vendor kind of sitting at a tea table, kind of brewing up different types of teas. He's usually drinking some himself, but what happens is any guests or customers that are walking in the shop, he or she will invite them to sit down and sample some of the teas that they may have. It's a good opportunity to actually sit down and talk to the vendors about a little bit more about their teas. It's a good chance to sample a whole bunch of different varieties of teas brewed correctly, and then, you know, as you're tasting them, you actually really can tell straight away whether it's something that you're going to enjoy or not, and then from there you can make a more informed purchasing decision. So all that being said, many of you though may live in cities or towns that actually don't have any kind of Chinese tea shops, so it may be a little bit hard for you to actually be able to go into these shops and experience that kind of full Chinese tea service. So in those cases, you'll probably be turning to online or kind of websites to try and source your Chinese teas. So a few things you can do is, once again, trying to go for recommendations. Try and find some tea-related forums or tea-related kind of meetups or even Facebook groups, and just ask for some recommendations around there. Once you have your list of tea websites, there are a few things you can consider when deciding whether this is the right tea vendor for you or not. So one thing to look out for is to try and find vendors that are really open and transparent about how they source their teas and where they source their teas from. So check out their websites, check out their social media pages. Do they tell you, which regions do they get their teas from? Do they tell you, who they get them from? Are they, how much information are they willing to share with you? Because we feel that a lot of people nowadays are saying that they get teas, straight from the farm, straight from the source and producers, but they actually don't dive a little bit deeper and, talk about, whether that they've actually visited those locations as well. The more a tea vendor can tell you about this, if it's not on their site, if it's not on their social media pages, if you ask them a question, can they tell you which region it's from? The more they can tell you, the more transparent and open. And if they can't tell you, if they don't know where it's from, are they open? Are they honest about it? Because the more open and transparent and honest they are about their products, the more that they can describe about each and every one of their teas, the more likely it is that they know a lot about these teas, which in turn is a sign for quality. So there's a little website out there called Tea Angle that's been doing some really great stuff. Shameless plug. Obviously, that's the tea company that Dawn and I both run. So what we like to do in how we source our teas is before we decide to arrange any type of tea that we have on our site, we like to visit the region that the teas are produced to actually find out a little bit more about that tea, to really try and get a better understanding of the character of those teas, what makes them unique, to understand what the farmers go through to meet different farmers, to actually get an understanding of the skill and the knowledge that's required to actually get the best out of these different tea leaves. And then once we have set that kind of baseline, then we feel confident to go out and actually be able to source that type of tea. This is by no means the easy way to source tea. In fact, it's probably the hardest method. What we want to do is we really want to find teas that are a true reflection of their origin and share that quality, like all those different qualities, with you guys out there. And we feel that if we don't travel directly to origin to meet these farmers and to really try and learn as much as we can about all these different regions, we feel that it's a really big disservice for all you tea lovers out there. So another thing to consider when looking for a trusted tea vendor is the pricing of their teas. Now, there's a bit of an old Chinese saying about tea that goes, expensive tea isn't necessarily good, but good tea is expensive, relatively speaking. So once you start diving into this complex world of Chinese teas, you'll soon realize that pricing for teas, even teas that that have the same names, can vary dramatically. So for example, in a recent video, Dawn and I, along with our friend Adeline, tasted an authentic original Jinjunmei black tea, and the price for that is $220, for just 50 grams of tea. But if you do a quick online search for Jinjinli black tea, you'll find that some other vendors would be selling this type of black tea for $12.95 for 70 grams. Same name, but completely different teas. Now, I've got nothing against anyone spending, huge amounts of money on things that they love. I mean, what you do with your money is completely your choice. But rest assured, if you're just getting into this world of Chinese tea, you don't need to be spending astronomically ridiculous amounts of money on any particular type of tea. As a rough guide though, be prepared to pay, I'd say, roughly around anywhere between $15 to $30 for 50 grams of decent tea. Think of it like buying a bottle of wine. A bottle of Pinot Noir can range from anywhere between $9 a bottle to $12 to $25 to $100. It's the same kind of thing. You get the same name for that wine, but you get varying different prices. It's exactly the same when you're looking at Chinese teas. Final point for this video is really, if you want to get into the world of Chinese tea, the best thing to do is to just get started. Now, there's a lot of points that we kind of covered in this video, and when you're just trying to get started, you're doing all this research, there's a tendency to potentially overthink things a little. But best way to understand more about Chinese tea is simply to drink more tea. Drink good tea. And yes, even drink bad tea. If you accidentally buy some bad tea, take that as a bit of a learning experience. Take that completely in your stride and use that as a learning experience so you know what to steer away from. Don't stress too much about trying to brew tea in the correct way. Most teas that you would buy would have sort of brewing instructions come with it. Start off with that as a starting point, and once you kind of get a feel for it, then you can start making slight adjustments to I guess tailor, to have your brew more tailored towards your taste. 10 years ago when I first bought that Dian Hong, I wasn't stressing about how to brew it correctly or anything like that. I literally used a teapot like this with about this amount of leaves, and I just hit it with boiling water. I brewed it for about 3 minutes and poured it out, and that brew was a true revelation. Completely sparked my interest to want to dive deeper into this world of Chinese tea. So really, when you're getting started, don't stress too much about the brewing parameters. Start with the packaging instructions and then work your way from there. Okay, so that's it for our tips for beginners trying to get into the world of Chinese teas. So what did you think? Was it useful to you guys? Are you feeling a little bit more confident, or feeling that you've got a bit more of a framework that you can use to dive further into the world of Chinese teas? And what about you serious tea drinkers out there? What are some of the tips that you would give a beginner looking to try and get into the world of Chinese teas? We'd love to hear from you guys, so please comment below and let us know what you think. If you found this video useful, please share it, like it, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and let's get more people into the world of Chinese teas, because it is truly a wonderful and magical place to explore. Till next time, see you guys.